Hey, yo.
If I can be serious for a minute.
Oh, yeah. Acknowledge me. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. Come on in, sit down. It's time for another edition of DB's Territory Treasures. I am DB, and you're probably figuring out by now that I love the old school. So if you're still hanging out here, checking these out, listening to these, downloading and subscribing, man, I really appreciate it. So you must be a little bit of a fan of the old school too. So thanks a lot, man. I really do appreciate you supporting my side project here. I am affiliated with the Sit Down Marks podcast. We are a podcast almost 5 years old, going strong here. You can check us out on sitdownmarks.com or go check us out on any of those podcast platforms that you listen. Just search Sit Down Marks. All right. So the latest Sit Down Marks podcast is out now, and we're talking about who are the top baby faces, who's doing a good job being a good baby face, helping out, selling tickets, putting butts in seats, selling t-shirts, that kind of stuff. So we're talking about that. So make sure you go check that out. But today on this podcast, I get to talk about a guy super tough, man, tougher than a $2 steak, if you will. A guy we know that says that a lot. Eventually, I've grown to love this guy. I really wasn't a big fan of his growing up, especially when I was little, because, he's not like a type of wrestler that would appeal to a younger 10-year-old fella like myself. But today I'm going to talk about Mr. Ronnie Garvin. So what do we know about Ronnie Garvin, man? We know he's got the hands of stone. He could knock you out with one punch, whether you see it coming or not. That was probably his best nickname, if you ask me. But his probably more prominent nickname was Rugged Ronnie Garvin, because he had that one across WCW, NWA, and WWF too. But he had that name kind of like for his, his grimy technical background, rough around the edges, type of wrestler. And this guy, he looked like he walked straight out of the military. He was blonde hair, cut short, with like a flat top, you know what I mean? Like I said, almost like a military type look he had. And he always wore like these like short wrestling boots. He kind of reminded me a lot of like the way Greg the Hammer Valentine, always came to the ring. Short boots, trunks, ready to just kick ass, right? But the blonde hair, that's what really always kind of like, drawed my attention to him, you know what I mean? And then, the plain color tights, always a solid, color tights. But to me, probably the one true symbol of Rugged Ronnie Garvin to me was he wore this like signature white towel right around his neck, way before Mike Tyson did it, to the ring. Sometimes it was bearing like a little stitching logo that said RG on it, like they did back in the day, when they would just put, their initials, on their trunks and their boots. Ronnie put it on his towel, but make no mistake about it, when the towel came off to start the match, that's how Ronnie showed you that he was ready. Somebody was about to get their ass kicked for sure. Ronnie's he was a Canadian pro wrestler. He had a unique move called the Garvin Stomp. Now, once he had his opponent down, what this was is that his opponent down on the mat, he would basically stomp their body all the way around, like all the way around the world, you know what I mean? All the way around his body, from his head to his feet, all of it, he would just stomp it all the way around, the Garvin Stomp, like he had like just a couple of different signature moves, but man, were they good. And man, he really paid attention when, he did those. But, I mentioned he was Canadian, born March the 30th, 1945 in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The territory here, Jim Crockett Promotion, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, somewhere around the 80s, but Ronnie cut his teeth in the business working in Georgia, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee in the 70s, that kind of stuff. He did have an early run in Jim Crockett as a jobber in the 70s, but returned in the 80s as the Hands of Stone Ronnie Garvin, and that's when I really started to pick up on him. But, Ronnie type of wrestler he was, man. He was a man's man, no nonsense type of guy. You know, he was a favorite to fans of technical wrestling. He could tie you up, put you in a pretzel. You know, the promos, some good, some bad. You know, some he tripped over his words a little bit. You know, that kind of stuff. But you know, he had a couple of them. But you know, Ronnie, you guys look at him and tell he's not going to be a promo guy. You know what I mean? But you know, he did pretty good. He did pretty good. A lot better than most. You know, could say. You know, but say he probably got better with them mostly in Jim Crockett Promotions, you know, if you're asking me. But, you know, when you say the name Ronnie Garvin, right, to somebody, you know, from who may, you know, have watched the old school in the old days, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, they probably mention the name back to you, Miss Atlanta Lively. Now, what's that you say? Well, sit down. Let me lend an ear. Let's talk about Miss Atlanta Lively. You know, this is probably a funny grin coming across your face right now if you know of Miss Atlanta Lively. So you know what I'm about to talk about. So Miss Atlanta Lively, right? This was Ronnie's dressed up alter ego, but he was in drag. You know, so this character was brought on a couple times. The particular one I remember is her, whatever, was brought in to be Jimmy Valiant's tag team partner, and where it turned out to be a bloodbath at Starrcade 85. She would also show up again when Ric Flair beat Jimmy Garvin, and Rick would end up supposedly winning a date with Jimmy's valet at the time, who was Precious, but Precious turned out to be Miss Atlanta Lively instead. So it was a fun character for Ronnie. I watched a lot of interviews where Ronnie talked about, you know, he made a lot of money doing this, you know, this gimmick, and it was fun, you know, for the time or whatever. But Google Miss Atlanta Lively if you don't know, you know, feast your eyes on that beauty. You know, from back in those days, but you know, you at least get a good laugh and see what, you know, kind of like what we're talking about here, you know. Ronnie and he feuded with the Midnight Express a lot. You know, this came along with Miss Atlanta Lively, you know, that kind of stuff. Even lost a street fight at Starrcade 86 against Jim Cornette's bodyguard, Big Bubba, who we would later become to know as the Big Boss Man. Rest in peace, Boss Man. Now, you know, and Ronnie too, you know, the correlation, you know, back in the day, I didn't understand it a lot back then either, but I, you know, like, didn't understand a lot of things in wrestling. You got a guy, Ronnie Garvin, face heel, kind of back and forth, and then a guy, Jimmy Garvin, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, part of the Freebirds. You know, he you know, would come out with Precious. He was a Garvin too, but in real life, Ronnie was the stepdad of gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. He married Jimmy's mother, who was a widow a long time ago. So, yeah, but, you know, imagine me as a kid, right? So confused why two wrestlers had the same last name, one heel, one face at the time, you know, or at any time, right? You know, they really don't even kind of mention it or touch on it or whatever at, you know, at the shows or on the programs, you know, that kind of stuff. But, you know, but maybe they did at some point, you know, but wrestling, right? So I do remember, you know, he was the NWA US Tag Team Champions, because I always remember the US Tag Team Champions back in those days. Jim Crockett, they had US, they had World, you know, Tag Team Champions. So he was the US Tag Team Champions with Barry Windham. So, you know, and another thing too is, you know, Ronnie wrestled, you know, the tough guys, you know, a lot of times, you know, he wrestled Ox Baker. You know, check out this promo with Ronnie as he's talking to Gordon Soley about his match with Ox Baker.
In winning the TV championship, the man with the hands of stone, Ronnie Garvin. Congratulations.
Thank you, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to wish you a happy new year and everybody out there. You know, I'm very proud to be the new television champion. There's a man around here that's been challenging me for weeks. By the name of Ox Baker, he was not allowed to wrestle on TV. Well, today he's going to be wrestling because I've accepted his challenge. You know, he's a big, bad, mean, big individual with quite of a background. He's got a mean heart punch. He's been hurting a lot of people, and he was not allowed to wrestle on TV. Well, today, you're going to have to prove it to me, Ox Baker. We're going to have to step into that ring, and we're going to find out. I'm going to shut you up for good. The best way to do it is to beat him. And, you know, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of money in these titles. There's a lot of money in the tag team battle royals, over the top rope battle royal.
Yes,
a lot
indeed,
of big money.
A lot of big battle royals going on right
and
now.
I'm very proud to be part of it.
Well, I can certainly understand. By the way, I heard that somewhere along the way, Miss Brenda Britton fell victim to the palms of your hands and a rather resounding spanking.
Well, you know, sometimes a little spanking will cure a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, I think they did indeed. There you have it, Ronnie Garvin, the new television champion, and you're going to be defending the title today then against Ox Baker.
That's right, Gordon.
That is something to look forward to. Ronnie Garvin, it's certainly a pleasure to see him as the new national television champion. We've got a...
Man, I'm telling you, like, I miss Gordon Soley, you know, but it's just awesome to go back and hear those old promos, you know, the way they conducted them, you know, and that kind of stuff. So it's really, really, really cool there. So like I said, you know, Ronnie not too great on promos, but you know, he got the point across. But you know, I want to talk about too, like, you know, what a cool name to me, like Rugged Ronnie Garvin, Hands of Stone. You know, what a cool wrestling name. You know, especially when, you know, Flair would be in a feud with him. He'd say, Garvin. You know, a lot of that. So really, really cool, man. But a funny story, man, about Ronnie and Ox. So Ronnie worked in Angelo Paffo's International Championship Wrestling. You know, he feuded with like Pez Watley and a guy named Randy Savage. Never heard of him. But Ox Baker, to me, the scariest looking wrestler I think I've ever seen. He still holds that title. You know, Google him if you don't know. But Ronnie knocked out Ox's dentures in a match. Not sure if it was planned or not, but stomped on him afterwards. I could imagine doing that to Ox. I feel like he'd forever be trying to kill me. I'd probably still be running, but, you know, no nonsense Ronnie, you know, hit the big guys in the mouth and, you know, stomp their dentures, right? So look, Ronnie ended up, you know, in the WWF in the 80s, bringing the rugged name with him. You know, Ronnie just as tough as they make them, you know, not real flashy. You know, I can appreciate guys like that, you know, like in my older age, you know, just a real ass kicker, you know. So check out this promo from Ronnie right after he joined the WWF.
You know, Greg Valentine, there's a lot of ways to defeat an opponent, especially when they're like you, a very nervous individual. You see, they always said that 2 brains is better than 1. Well, you've got 2. You got your manager and yours. And it still ain't working because you 2 are stupid enough to reinstate me in wrestling because your ego is so large that you want to prove to the whole world that you're better than Ronnie Garvin. Well, I've got to tell you something. I didn't get the name of Rugged Ronnie Garvin by selling popcorn on the corner. No, I've got it by beating up people. And I don't care who likes it, who don't. When you pay to see Ronnie Garvin, you see a fight. And I'm going to tell you, you better tell your friends to pay to see you get.
There you go. Pretty good promo there on Greg the Hammer. So, you know, I bet you they had some stiff matches for sure. But, you know, like to talk about, you know, Ronnie, not flashy, but go check out, you know, some of his matches. Iron Sheik, Buzz Sawyer, Tully Blanchard, you know, and Ric Flair. And speaking of Ric Flair, you know, this is my connection, man. If you're listening to DB's Territory Treasures for the first time, thank you. But always end the show or try to round the show out with a connection. You know, what was my connection to Ronnie Garvin? Well, you know, listen, Starcade 87, man. You know, so imagine I'm 12 years old. I'm really starting to get into heels, and Flair had my utmost attention, right? I wanted and needed Ric Flair to win the belt back, you know, the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Famously, you know, this was Chi-Town Heat, you know, but I was literally scared that Ronnie was gonna, you know, knock Ric Flair out, you know, and not win the belt back in the cage. But, you know, never stop believing, right? Woo! Rick gets the win. I'm happy, man. And but I always remember that, you know, that match definitely. For sure, that one kind of always sticks out as me as like the, you know, the Ronnie Garvin match, the feud. You know, he looked good with that, with Big Gold, man. Ronnie did. It really looked like it fit him. But yeah, so I remember that a lot from my childhood. So, All right, everybody. Look, I am the Dirty Bird. That's going to do it for this edition of Dirty Bird's Territory Treasures. I can't thank you guys enough for the support, for the feedback, for all the downloading and subscribing. Really do appreciate it. Thank you guys for all the support. We'll be back soon. I'll be back soon when we dive into another version of DB's Territory Treasures. Appreciate it, guys. Be safe out there.